I built everything I have from nothing, and I mean that in the most literal sense possible. My name is Tessa. I grew up in a two-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati with my mom and my younger brother, and we never had more than we needed. My mom worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility for 15 years so I could go to a state school, and I repaid her by graduating with a degree in accounting and landing a job at a mid-sized pharmaceutical company outside of Columbus as a compliance auditor. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of job people write movies about. But it was mine, and I was good at it, and I was proud of it in that quiet, private way you're proud of something you actually had to fight for. I met my boyfriend at a work conference in Chicago. He was funny and warm, and he had this way of listening to you like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 8 months before he ever mentioned his family had money. By the time I found out, I was already in love with him, so I told myself it didn't matter. I should have paid more attention to the warning signs. The first time I went to his family's home in Worthington, the kind of suburb where every driveway has a fountain, his mother opened the door, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you're smaller than I pictured." She said it with a smile. That was the thing about her. Everything she said came with a smile, so you spent the next 20 minutes wondering if you'd imagined the venom. His father was quieter but colder. He ran a private equity firm and he had the handshake of a man who measured other people in units of net worth. His sister was my boyfriend's age, 29, and she'd never worked a full-time job in her life, but she had opinions about my sector that she delivered with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a slow child. My boyfriend, I'll call him my boyfriend throughout this because calling him anything warmer feels wrong now, genuinely did not seem to notice any of it, or maybe he noticed and didn't think it was a problem. I still don't know which is worse. The first dinner was uncomfortable, the second dinner was worse. By the third time, I started dreading the drive up there in a way that sat in my chest like a stone. And then came the weekend that changed everything. His parents were hosting their annual summer cookout. Extended family, business associates, neighbors. His mother personally called me to invite me, which had never happened before, and she was so warm on the phone that I told myself maybe things were shifting. Maybe she was making an effort. I wanted to believe that. I wanted it badly enough that I ignored the part of my brain that said something felt off. I arrived on a Saturday afternoon in late July. The house looked beautiful, the kind of staged perfection that makes you feel underdressed no matter what you're wearing. I was wearing a sundress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, and his sister took one look at it and said, "Oh, that's so fun." Very Target the smile. My boyfriend squeezed my hand and steered me toward the drink table. He poured me a glass of white wine and went off to say hello to someone across the yard. I stood there holding my glass and tried to look comfortable. About 45 minutes in, I started feeling wrong. It came on gradually, which is why I didn't recognize it at first. I thought I was tired. I'd worked late Thursday and Friday, and the drive up had been longer than usual because of construction. I set my wine glass down on a side table and told myself I just needed a minute to sit. There was a bench near the garden, away from the crowd, and I walked toward it slowly. I didn't make it. The next thing I knew, I was lying on a couch inside the house. The light was different, later, golden, the way afternoon goes when it's tipping toward evening. My head felt like it was packed with wet sand. I sat up slowly and the room swayed. I looked down at myself. My cardigan, I'd thrown it over my shoulders when it got breezy, was on backwards. My jewelry, a small gold bracelet my mother had given me for my birthday, was gone from my left wrist. And my bag, my work bag that I had brought because I had a USB drive with a project file I'd been meaning to review over the weekend, was sitting open on the coffee table across the room. I always kept it zipped, always. I sat there for a long moment just breathing. My boyfriend came in a few minutes later with a glass of water and an explanation that I was probably just dehydrated and that I'd scared everyone. He was solicitous and gentle, and in the car on the way home he held my hand and said I should take better care of myself. I didn't say anything about the cardigan. I didn't say anything about the bag. I just sat in the passenger seat and watched the highway go by and felt something cold settle into my stomach that I couldn't shake for days. When I got home, I checked the USB drive. It had been accessed. The timestamp said 4:47 p.m., during the window when I was unconscious. I keep the drive password protected, but whoever had tried to get in had failed. The file I cared about most, a compliance audit I was in the middle of on our company's contract billing practices, was intact, but someone had tried. Someone had gone into my bag while I was unconscious and tried to get into my work files. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time after that. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't just fear, it was grief. I had been with this man for over a year. I had met his family at least a dozen times. I had bought his mother a birthday gift and remembered his father's dietary restrictions and shown up and tried, genuinely tried, to be someone they could accept. And while I was lying unconscious on their couch, someone in that family had gone through my bag. The bracelet was gone. My mother's bracelet. I gave myself 48 hours to fall apart quietly. Then I got organized. I didn't say anything to my boyfriend. That was the hardest part, seeing him on Wednesday evening, letting him put his arm around me on the couch, acting like nothing had happened. But I needed time to think clearly, and I knew that if I confronted him before I understood the full picture, I would lose whatever advantage I had. The first thing I did was go to my company's legal department. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. I told them I had reason to believe someone had attempted unauthorized access to my work device over the weekend, and I wanted to document it properly. They took it seriously. Pharmaceutical compliance data is sensitive in ways that go beyond the obvious, and the woman in legal, a sharp-eyed attorney named Ms. Fairbanks, who had been with the company for 12 years, told me to keep the drive in the secure document safe and to note every interaction I had with anyone outside the company related to this matter going forward. The second thing I did was go to the urgent care clinic 3 days after the cookout. I know it was late. The nurse told me, gently but clearly, that the window for detecting most common sedatives had passed, but that there were certain compounds that stayed in the system longer. The blood work didn't show anything conclusive. But the doctor noted my symptoms, the sudden onset, the depth of unconsciousness, the disorientation upon waking. And she told me, off the record, that it was consistent with what she'd seen in patients who had been given something. I kept that documentation. The third thing I did was call my cousin, who worked in private security. I didn't tell him why exactly, I just told him I had a situation and I needed someone I could trust to help me set up a small audio recording device in a way that was legal in Ohio. He didn't ask too many questions. He was over on Thursday and we spent 2 hours setting things up on my phone, and he explained the state's one-party consent law clearly enough that I understood exactly what I could and couldn't record. Then I waited. My boyfriend's family had a habit of gathering on Sunday afternoons at his parents' place. Not a big formal dinner, just the family. He had mentioned a few weeks ago that his parents wanted to talk about the future at the next one, which I'd taken to mean they wanted to discuss our relationship timeline. He'd asked if I'd come. I had agreed. I went back. I know what everyone's going to say, the same thing the comment section would scream, "Why would you go back?" And I understand the question. But here is the thing about going back. They did not know that I knew, and I needed them to believe I didn't know. Because if they believed I was still trusting, still unaware, they would talk. People who think they've gotten away with something always talk eventually. I wore a dress with a pocket. I kept my phone in the pocket with the voice memo app running. I did not bring my work bag. His mother greeted me at the door with a warmth that was almost convincing. His father shook my hand, that measuring handshake, and said it was good to see me. His sister gave me a hug and said she'd been worried about me after the cookout. I thanked her and said I was feeling much better. We sat in the living room with drinks. I had water. I watched where everyone's hands went when they were near my glass, and I made sure to be the one who carried it at all times. About an hour in, my boyfriend got up to help his father with something in the garage, and his sister followed them out. It was his mother and me alone in the living room. She leaned forward, the smile was gone. "Tessa," she said, "I think we should have an honest conversation." I folded my hands in my lap and looked at her calmly. "Of course, my son is in line to take over his father's firm. That comes with certain expectations about his partner." She paused, choosing her words the way you pick up something sharp. "There are people in our circle who have been asking questions about you, about your background, about your family's circumstances." I waited. "There were some photos taken at the cookout," she said. "I want you to understand this is not a threat. I just want you to be aware that the way you were, the state you were in, it could be misinterpreted." "What kind of photos?" I asked, and my voice came out level and quiet, which surprised even me. She smiled again, but it was thinner now. "You were asleep, sweetheart. You looked not well. In an environment with alcohol." She tilted her head. "My husband has connections at the HR level of several firms in Columbus. He's on the board of 2 of them, actually. We're not unreasonable people. We don't want anyone's career to suffer unnecessarily. But we do think it might be worth considering whether this relationship is really the right fit for everyone involved." I sat with that for a moment. She had just told me, in the most careful possible language, that if I didn't walk away from her son voluntarily, they would circulate photographs of me in a drugged state to damage my professional reputation. I appreciate your honesty, I said. She looked satisfied. I excused myself to use the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror for 60 seconds and breathed. Then I walked back to the living room and sat down and kept talking to her, like we were having a perfectly pleasant afternoon, and she told me more than she should have, because she thought she'd already won. By the time my boyfriend and his father came back inside, I had everything I needed. I spent the next 2 weeks working with Miss Fairbanks and a private attorney I hired on the side. What his mother had done, attempting to use manipulated photographs to coerce an employee into leaving a relationship under threat of professional retaliation, crossed several lines. The attempted unauthorized access to my work device was a separate matter entirely, one that involved the company's legal team and eventually reached the attention of the company's security officer. His father's firm, as it turned out, was under a routine regulatory review. The compliance audit I had been working on, the one that someone had tried to access from my USB drive, involved a company that was a subsidiary of a business his father's firm had a stake in. I had not known that when I started the audit, but when I made the connection, I reported it up the chain immediately, the way I was legally required to do. I did not tell my boyfriend any of this. I want to be very clear about that, because I know the question is coming. I did not pull him aside and show him the recording. I did not give him the opportunity to warn his family. That was not me being cruel. That was me being smart, for once, in the way I should have been smart from the beginning. The unraveling happened at his parents' annual fall charity dinner. It was held at a hotel ballroom downtown, and his father was being honored with some kind of philanthropist award. His mother had personally called me to invite me, again with that warmth that I now understood completely, and I said yes, because my attorney had told me the timing was right and that she needed me present. I arrived with Miss Fairbanks. I want to tell you that my boyfriend saw me walk in with her, and the look on his face broke something in me that has not fully healed. He knew something was wrong. He started toward me, and I just shook my head very slightly, and he stopped. His father was standing at the front of the room when the investigator from the regulatory agency approached him. I watched from across the room. His mother was beside him, holding a glass of champagne, and she saw me first. The smile left her face entirely. It was the first time I had ever seen her face without it, and I remember thinking that she looked very old, suddenly, in a way she hadn't before. The firm's connection to the subsidiary under audit, combined with the evidence of attempted unauthorized access to my work device, had opened a much larger investigation than I had initially triggered. His father had apparently been aware that my audit could expose certain billing irregularities that would affect the regulatory review. Someone in his family, the evidence pointed to his sister, who had worked briefly in his father's firm and had a background in finance, had accessed my bag at the cookout and attempted to copy the drive's contents. They did not get the files, but they tried. And in trying, they left a digital trail that was significantly more incriminating than anything I could have said on my own. His father's business associate was escorted out of the ballroom first. Then a quiet conversation happened near the back of the room involving his father and two men in dark suits. His sister, standing near the bar, took out her phone and then slowly put it back when she realized the woman beside her was also an investigator. His mother stayed very still in the center of the room. She still had her champagne glass. She set it down eventually, very carefully, on a high table, and then she stood with her hands clasped in front of her and did not say anything at all. The philanthropist award was not presented that evening. I found my bracelet in a follow-up search of the property. It had been in a drawer in the guest room, the room I'd been placed in after I lost consciousness at the cookout. Someone had taken it off my wrist while I was sedated, and they had kept it, which I will never fully understand the logic of. The toxicology specialist who consulted on the investigation told me the compound they'd used was something that left the bloodstream quickly, which is why my urgent care blood work had come back inconclusive. But they found trace evidence in a glass retrieved from the property, and that, combined with everything else, was more than enough. His father and his sister were formally charged. His mother was not charged criminally. The coercion conversation she'd had with me was recorded clearly, but her attorney argued it was ambiguous enough to constitute a civil matter, rather than a criminal one. My own attorney is still pursuing that separately. The firm is under full regulatory review and is not expected to survive it. My boyfriend called me 17 times in the 2 weeks after the dinner. I answered once, about 10 days later, because I thought I owed him at least that much. He asked me why I hadn't told him. I told him I hadn't told him because every time I'd needed him to notice something was wrong, he'd found a reason not to see it. He was quiet for a long time after that. I didn't fill the silence. Eventually, he said he was sorry. I said I knew and I believed him, and I hoped that meant something to Tim going forward. Then I said goodbye. My mother's bracelet is back on my left wrist. I put it on the morning after I got it back, and I haven't taken it off since. I still live in Columbus. I still work in pharmaceutical compliance at the same company, and I'm actually moving into a senior role next quarter, Miss. Fairbanks put in a word, which was generous of her and not something I had asked for. My apartment still has the same furniture and the same coffee maker I've had since my first job out of college, and I don't have a fountain in my driveway, and I am not small in the way that woman meant when she said it on that first afternoon at her front door. I am, in fact, exactly as large as I need to be. I built everything I have from nothing, and nothing that family did. Not the drug, not the photographs, not the threats, not the bracelet sitting in that guest room drawer like they were keeping a souvenir of what they thought they'd gotten away with, took any of it from me. They thought I was the weakest person in that house. I just let them keep thinking it until I didn't need them to anymore.